Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. My name is Stelios Morfidis. For those of you who do not know me, allow me to introduce myself. I'm a business editor and storyteller for the Greek weekly newspaper Proto, Thema. And I'm probably one of the luckiest journalists here at the Delphi Economic Forum. I will have the pleasure and honor of chatting with a man who, if he lived in ancient Greece, would surely have a place near Pythia. This by chance, since most of the predictions he made 30 or 40 years ago about the new digital economy and people's daily lives have been confirmed. Ladies and gentlemen, the co-founder of MIT's Idea Lab and one of the gurus of digital technology, Mr. Negroponte. Hello, Mr. Negroponte.
Hello.
It's a privilege talking to you. I was thinking the other day how nice it would be to have this conversation in Delphi, having, in the background, the archaeological side of the article. I hope we will have this opportunity in a year from now. First of all, I would like to ask you, how was this past year for you personally, and how much did the pandemic affect your lifestyle?
Well, my lifestyle changed, but in one that was not normal. It didn't recede. I started doing things that were extreme in the sense of a lot of travel, going to foreign countries. And from the beginning of September to the end of March, I traveled to about 10 or 12 countries in North Africa and in Europe and Asia, actually. So I behaved as if it didn't happen. And I don't say that with pride, but it happens to be what I did before the vaccine, even. The impact, however, on my impressions at least, were that people whom I didn't expect to be conservative about the virus became very conservative, and people whom I didn't expect to be liberal about it became very liberal. And let me put myself on the extreme liberal side, not that I am a Trump voter and am in denial, but that my behavior was a little reckless or a little in defiance. Maybe I have a different view of mortality because of my age and the way I live. But I found that other people who receded to the extreme, they didn't come out of their house for a year, were not necessarily the ones I expected to do that. And that to me was a big surprise in the pandemic.
Now, has the outbreak of the pandemic changed your outlook, maybe about how people and economies will interact or travel?
Well, what the outbreak did is reveal the degree of superficiality that a connected world could bring. So when you are forced into the connectivity, let me pick an example, education. So you have to do school remotely. Most of the examples I saw took the worst parts of school, that of a teacher standing in front of the room telling children, and automated that. And that's what was, if you will, solved. And yet the more important parts of school, the more atelier parts, the studio parts, the creative parts, even playing with a capital P, particularly for young children, was not amplified, was not celebrated, and was in some cases not even made possible. So we were forced to go into a level of connectivity, but we managed with great success to not change the fundamental nature of anything.
Okay, that's quite a problem, but and there is a lot of talking about how the pandemic is a game changer, and I don't know if you think about that. Okay, no doubt the digital transition has accelerated in the run-up of the pandemic, but is it something that will fundamentally change the way things work?
Well, there are a handful of things that you can predict pretty with certainty. Um, for example, the concept of commuting, getting into a car and driving for an hour to go to an office, to spend 8 hours to get back in the car and drive for another hour, is going to decline. Now, some people do it because they enjoy driving cars. Some people do it because it gets them out of the house and they don't really enjoy being in the house in the first place. And so there are a few people who would continue doing that. But the general trend will be one that is typical of the digital world, and that is that the boundaries between things become porous. Before the digital world, you were either in or out. You were that something was work and something else was play. Uh, they didn't commingle. Life was a fried egg. And by fried egg, I mean there was a line between the yolk and the white of the egg. And the digital world has made life more of an omelet where it's more mixed. You can be at
Mhm.
work, you can get an email from your loved one, you can be deal at the same time. In other words, it's more commingled. So that commingling did start to be more obvious to more people during the pandemic.
Okay. Years ago, you mentioned the enormous importance of biotechnology, and today, through biotechnology, the vaccine for the pandemic was found in a very short time. How far do you think its potential can go?
Well, yes, short time, but not short enough. And I was surprised, in fact, how long it took. Um, that the time required to me seemed unnecessarily long. And one of the reasons that it was long is that there was a lot of competition versus collaboration. And that's a longer story that we can discuss afterwards. But the examples of biotech are much more ones that have to do with designer babies, living until you're 250 years old, the elimination of all diseases, all of them gone. Um, those are so momentous, uh, and they're big changers, and they are not wild guesses. They are probably going to happen, and they're going to happen. Well, they will happen, but it's how soon will they happen? That's a very big difference. And so when we look, the digital world had its run. It's a little bit like plastics in the 1950s, and it still has things to do, no question. But it's not where the big game changers are going to live.
You've mentioned the need for cooperation, but even in the most difficult time, each country had pushed its agenda. Politics did not seem to accept that there was a common enemy now with the coronavirus. So the Westerners developed their own vaccines, the Chinese the same, the Russians the same, and they all competed with each other, perhaps reflecting the tense political situation of recent years of a number of issues: trade relations, economic superiority, geopolitical diplomacy, etc. I have heard you speak in favor of US-China cooperation, but is such a thing really possible?
You know, the let's separate it in two parts because one is a disease, which I call nationalism. Nationalism is a terrible disease. And I thought 20 years ago that the internet would relieve the disease, would make the nation state less uh, important because you had all these other ways of organizing, of doing things. So that's one part of the story. And then the other part of the story is the the threat of a large economic power that is bigger than, in many cases, better than the United States that is in some decline. So when you have the largest economy, in some sense, declining, and you have the second largest economy quite noticeably improving, it's kind of difficult to say that, it's they are doing something to us. Not at all. They have placed their values in very different places. They build
Mhm.
more universities per week than any country, and we close more than they build. I mean, there are a lot of little things happening.
Mhm. So, what could collaboration between these great powers bring?
Well, we've cooperated in the past. We've cooperated in outer space. We've cooperated in a few areas. And I think we should cooperate now on nuclear fusion, because
Mhm.
nuclear fusion is the solution to all of our environmental and energy problems. And everybody says, well, it's way off. Well, way off may be 15 years, maybe it's 20, but that's a small number. And if everybody collaborates, it may be a lot less.
Mhm.
And so I think
Now
the
you're, yes.
Japanese, I was going to say, in the 1980s, the Japanese had a concept exactly at the moment they were rising, and they were doing very well in technology, very well in electronics. They had a term called pre-competitive research, where all the competing companies joined in to do research together, so that the
Mhm.
basic research, the basic knowledge, is in fact shared. And that's a really good system. Very good system.
Now, if there is no cooperation, China takes the lead, and becomes the tech pioneer that will be able to define our daily lives or potentials, or there's out of question.
Well, we should all, I guess, learn Chinese. It's it's certain, it's absolute certain that their growth and strength and economy, in the end, the only thing about a country, and I know you're going to ask me about Greece before our 20 minutes are over, but the only thing is its size. Its
Mhm.
country and its wealth is its size. Now,
Mhm.
big countries today, like India, China, but let's leave China out for a second, India, Brazil, you name it, tend to be poor because they have lots of poor people. But as over time there's education and there's economic growth within the country, eventually the world's got to be equal on a per capita basis. So you have more people, you're a wealthier country. So
Mhm.
small countries have to punch higher than their weight. They've got to have something. And it's not everything, it's not in every walk of life. It may be a particular area of expertise. It may be, uh, it used to be a particular mineral, perhaps, which may no longer be as important as it was in the past. And so you get these funny situations like a absolutely poverty stricken country named Qatar 20 years ago discovers natural gas, and boom, it's one of the richest in the world. And I go down to the street to Harrods here in London and they own it. It was fast change based on mineral. But now if you have a fast change based on your expertise to do brain surgery or
Mhm.
your something else, that's localization more than competition. And I see that as continuing. But
Mhm.
fundamentally, it's the size of the country.
Okay, so where that puts Greece, what do you think?
Well, well, Greece has got uh, a very separate problem because Greece never forgets that it's the birthplace of democracy. And because of that, it gets a little caught up in its own importance, which is very significant. But I would say Greece has a higher proportion of exceptionalism that
Mhm.
that holds it back, maybe is what I should say. But you also have an extraordinary diaspora. You have a very good education system. You can complain all you want, but it's pretty good. You can make it better. Um, I love the fact that it's almost completely public education. Um, Greeks that I know, rich and poor, value education. So that's very important. And there's a little detail which you might not appreciate, and you're a perfect example of it. And that is your fluency in English. You speak English so well. Um, so you have two languages, maybe you speak five others, but just those two um, means that you were brought up thinking in an important way, that there's always two ways to say something, to think about something, and the words don't translate exactly. So the word, boat means one thing, something, and you learn as a child, if you learned English as a child, that not everything has one point of view. And then there's a different alphabet, there's a different way of constructing, which is a different way of thinking. And so thinking, speaking, it's a richness that Greece has, which also, by the way, would be true in many Arab countries and others, particularly that had different alphabets, different um, visualization systems as well. So you're reading one and reading the other, and you move between them. It's a pretty powerful base to build on, and
Okay. That,
it's it's I think it's important compared to Italy. I mean, just look at Italy. You go all over Italy, and so many very accomplished people don't speak English on a per capita basis. It's it's
Mhm.
it's different. Now, of course, the Italians think enough people speak Italian, so they do fine speaking Italian. The Greeks know not enough people in the world speak Greek. And so there is this push, and the push has affected the country's thinking. And I believe that language and thinking are very closely related. And when you have two languages, you sort of have two systems of thinking. And my dear friend Marvin Minsky, who invented the field of artificial intelligence, always said to me, "You don't know something, Nicholas, unless you know it in two ways."
Mhm.
And I thought that's interesting, to know something in two ways. So I think that's very important for Greece.
Yeah. So I have so many questions, but we have to closure. So last question: could you describe as the foreseeable future as you see it?
Well, the foreseeable future is going to depend on civic society. I think we are at the end of an era of dog eat dog. We have taught our children for 40 years, work for the private sector, make money, compete, win, whatever that means, win, win. And only idiots go into the public sector. Now, of course, that's not true, but we have a situation where some countries, particularly the socialist countries in the north, and Greece to some extent, and Chile and other socialist countries, where we see the success of civic society working.
Mhm.
Are you the kind of person walking down the street You see a paper on the street. Do you pick it up? I think it's
Personally,
very
I pick it up.
important to pick. We pick it up. We should pick it up and put it in the trash can. But there's some people that are part of the dog eat dog society where they don't think that's what they should do. They're above that. They're busy competing. They're busy things. And what's worse is their parents like that. So what happens? People go to school like MIT or Stanford, and who do they want to be? They want to be Mark Zuckerberg or Elon Musk. Come on, that's terrible. You want them to be Alan Turing, Albert Einstein, inventors. This other stuff is sucking out of basic science a diminishing resource. We are spending so much time today at entrepreneurial and startup and even big company levels, taking from basic science that we have a diminishing supply. And people aren't going in to do that. They're not saying, oh, I want to be a great scientist. And I want to be a great scientist for science's sake. That's a scientist. And we've got to rebuild that. And we've got to rebuild it for artists. We've got to rebuild it in many, many ways, because if everybody wants to start their own little company that does each other's laundry and feel that they're in a startup economy that is indicative of the current era, they may be, but it's a liability in the long-term social scheme. So I'm hoping we'll see a more civic, more collaborative, and more genuine in the sense that you do things because you want to do them, and you can do them, and you do them well, and you do them better and better and better.
So
I hope that
it's a powerful
happens.
message. I hope that too. Mr. Negroponte, thank you very much for this interesting conversation. And I hope we'll see each other next year in Delphi. So
We will.
Yeah. Okay. I cross my finger for it. So.
Okay. Okay.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for watching us. I hope. Okay. Next we will be all in Delphi. So goodbye.